At a high-end bank in downtown Chicago, a black man steps up to the counter for a routine withdrawal. But the teller barely glances at him before pushing his ID aside. Her tone, sharp and dismissive. Moments later, security is called, and he's dragged out like a criminal, while white customers walk out with stacks of cash. No questions asked. What the bank doesn't know is that they've just thrown out the wrong man. When his true identity is revealed, he'll show them who really holds the power here. Marcus Bennett stepped into the Bennett Financial branch at exactly 9 a.m. The glass doors parted smoothly, allowing the crisp morning air to follow him inside. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting sharp golden reflections on the polished tile floors. The bank was alive with the quiet hum of business. Employees in tailored suits moved briskly behind the counters. Clients stood in neat rows, waiting for their transactions. And the soft chime of the service bell rang at regular intervals. It was a well-oiled machine, just the way Marcus had envisioned when he built this institution from the ground up. Yet today, he wasn't here as the CEO. No meetings. No press conferences. No high-profile deals. Just a routine withdrawal. $15,000 from his personal account. Something any customer should be able to do without complication. He wasn't dressed in a custom suit or a designer watch. Just a neatly pressed light blue button-down, a pair of khaki pants, and clean sneakers. His presence was unassuming, blending seamlessly into the morning crowd. As he stepped further inside, his sharp eyes caught sight of a man at the counter. Middle-aged, white, clad in a charcoal gray blazer. The teller smiled warmly as she counted out neat stacks of cash, handing them over without hesitation. Marcus caught a glimpse of the amount on the transaction slip as the man turned. $20,000. The customer pocketed the money, nodded in appreciation, and strolled toward the exit. Untouched by scrutiny. Unquestioned. Unbothered. Marcus exhaled slowly, his jaw tightening for a split second before he unclenched it. He had seen this before. Felt it before. But today, more than ever, he was determined to ensure that his own establishment was not fostering that same brand of silent prejudice. Keeping his expression neutral, he moved toward the teller counters. The line was short, and within moments, he found himself standing in front of a blonde woman in a stiffly pressed navy blazer. Her nameplate read, Amy Carter. Unlike the previous transaction he had just witnessed, Amy did not offer a smile. She barely glanced at him before reaching beneath the counter and sliding a clipboard in his direction. "Fill this out," she said flatly. Her tone, mechanical, detached. No greeting. No pleasantries. Marcus studied her face for a moment before lowering his gaze to the form. Standard withdrawal slip. He had no issue filling it out. Procedures were procedures. But something about her demeanor was off. Still, he maintained his composure. Retrieving a pen from his pocket and quickly writing down the required information. Once done, he slid the clipboard back toward her, along with his driver's license. She took the slip, but didn't even glance at the ID. Instead, she took one look at the amount and immediately shoved the form back across the counter. "We can't process this," she said curtly, folding her arms. Marcus frowned, his fingers brushing against the rejected form. "Excuse me." Amy didn't blink. "We don't handle large cash withdrawals like this." His brow furrowed. I just watched that man walk out with $20,000 in cash. He gestured toward the exit, where the previous customer was now stepping onto the busy sidewalk. You didn't hesitate for a second with him. Amy's lips pressed into a thin line. That's different. Marcus leaned slightly forward, his voice calm but firm. How exactly? Amy averted her gaze for the first time. But not out of discomfort. More like irritation. Instead of answering, she turned her head slightly, eyes flicking toward the glass-walled office in the back, where Victoria Sanders, the manager, stood observing. And just like that, Marcus knew. Marcus followed Amy's gaze toward the glass-walled office at the back of the bank, where Victoria Sanders stood, arms crossed, watching the interaction with thinly veiled scrutiny. A woman in her mid-40s, clad in an immaculately tailored suit. She had the sharp, calculating look of someone who had already made up her mind, long before she would pretend to consider the facts. The moment their eyes met, she gave a slight nod, almost imperceptible. But it was enough. Amy's posture straightened, her confidence bolstered by the silent approval of her superior. When she turned back to Marcus, there was something colder in her eyes. She exhaled sharply, as if she were already exhausted by the conversation. I told you, she said, tapping the slip of paper still resting between them. We can't process this transaction. Marcus inhaled slowly, measured, keeping his patience in check. And I'm asking you why. Amy didn't answer immediately. Instead, she tapped her manicured nails against the counter, in a slow, deliberate rhythm, as if stalling. Finally, she sighed, tilting her head. It's just unusual, she said, her voice carrying that artificial sweetness people used when pretending to be reasonable. A cash withdrawal this large. It's suspicious. Marcus let the word hang in the air between them. Heavy and deliberate. Suspicious. He felt it settle in his chest. In his bones. The way it always did. When people like Amy used polite words to mask uglier intentions. He knew this game. He had played it his whole life. Maneuvering through unspoken rules that dictated who was given trust without question, and who was forced to prove, over and over, that they even had the right to exist in certain spaces. You didn't seem suspicious when he did the exact same thing, Marcus said. His voice, even, controlled. He didn't need to point. They both knew who he meant. So tell me, Amy. What's the difference? A flicker of something flashed in her eyes. A split-second hesitation before she recovered, shaking her head. Sir, I don't make the rules. Marcus let out a soft, humorless chuckle. You don't make the rules, he echoed. But you sure as hell know how to apply them selectively. Amy bristled, her lips pressing into a tight, thin line. I need to get my manager, she said abruptly. Her tone, clipped. She didn't wait for a response. Before she turned sharply on her heel and disappeared into the back office. Marcus didn't move. His fingers rested against the cool surface of the counter, tapping idly, matching the steady thud of his heartbeat. The air in the bank had shifted. Subtle but noticeable. As if the space itself had sensed the tension simmering beneath the surface. He could feel eyes on him. Other tellers glancing in his direction. Customers shifting uncomfortably. As if they knew something was happening, but didn't want to get involved. A few feet away, a woman, white, in her early 50s, watched him with thinly veiled curiosity. Lisa Parker. He read from the name tag pinned to her purse. She was standing near the customer service desk. Hands folded over the strap. As if debating whether to say something. Marcus met her gaze briefly. And for a moment. She hesitated. Before offering a small, uncertain smile. He didn't return it. Not because he was angry at her specifically. But because he knew how this played out. People like Lisa, they watched. They whispered. They noticed when things like this happened. But they rarely did anything about it. The door to the back office swung open. Victoria Sanders stepped out. Her heels clicked sharply against the tile. Her expression, unreadable. Amy followed closely behind. Her chin slightly lifted. The subtle smirk of someone who knew they had backup. Victoria stopped in front of the counter. Smoothing down the front of her blazer. As she studied Marcus. "Good morning, sir," she said. Her voice, polished and professional. The kind of tone reserved for handling complaints from difficult customers. "I understand you're trying to make a large withdrawal today." Marcus met her gaze evenly. "I am." Her smile was polite. But didn't reach her eyes. "Unfortunately, we have certain security protocols in place. For transactions of this size." Marcus tilted his head slightly. "Security protocols?" "Yes," she said smoothly. "For the safety of our customers and our staff. We have to be extra cautious with high-value withdrawals." Marcus folded his arms across his chest. His stance shifting slightly. "So what exactly does that mean for me?" Victoria offered a sympathetic expression. The kind that was meant to look apologetic. But was really just condescending. "It means we need to verify some additional information. Before proceeding." Marcus exhaled through his nose. "You mean my information? Because clearly you didn't need to verify anything. When that man withdrew more than I did." Victoria's smile didn't falter. But there was something in the way her jaw tensed. That told him she wasn't used to being challenged. "I can't speak to other customers' transactions," she said. Her tone growing sharper. "But in this case, I'll need to confirm the source of these funds. And verify your last deposit amount." Marcus felt his patience slip another inch. "You have my account number right in front of you. Look it up." Victoria's expression hardened. "I'm going to need you to cooperate, Mr. Bennett." Marcus laughed, short and incredulous. "Cooperate? I'm standing here. Giving you everything you need to do your job. And you're still finding reasons to refuse me. That's not protocol. That's profiling." The word hit the air like a slap. He saw it in the way Victoria's eyes flickered. The way Amy stiffened behind her. The way the room itself seemed to inhale. Waiting for what would come next. Victoria's lips parted. Then closed again. As if weighing her next words carefully. Then. Without looking away from Marcus. She lifted a single hand. And made a small, sharp gesture across the room. A figure stirred. Ethan Reynolds. The bank security guard. A broad-shouldered white man in his mid-30s. Straightened from where he had been leaning near the entrance. His gaze flickered toward Victoria. Then to Marcus. He didn't hesitate. He started walking toward the counter. Marcus didn't move. As Ethan Reynolds approached. His heavy boots echoing against the polished tile. The security guard was tall. Broad. The kind of man who carried his authority like a badge. He didn't need to flash. Because people like him never had to prove they belong. His expression was carefully neutral. But his posture wasn't. Shoulders squared. Hands loose at his sides. He walked with the slow, deliberate pace. Of someone preparing for an unnecessary escalation. Victoria didn't bother glancing at him. She didn't have to. The silent command had already been given. She kept her attention fixed on Marcus. Waiting. Watching. She expected compliance. They always did. Marcus let out a slow breath. Controlled, steady. Keeping his expression unreadable. Even as something hot curled in his chest. He had seen this play out too many times before. A scene as old as time. A black man being treated like a threat. In a space where he was supposed to belong. "I'm going to ask you again," Victoria said. Her voice still polished, still perfectly professional. As if she wasn't actively orchestrating his removal. "Can you verify the source of these funds?" Marcus's jaw tightened. "My paycheck," he said evenly. "Like every other time I've deposited money into this account." Victoria tilted her head slightly. Her eyes flicking to Amy. Who stood stiff behind the counter, arms crossed. "And can you provide the exact amount of your last deposit?" Marcus stared at her. He could feel the weight of the room pressing in now. Other customers were pretending not to listen. Tellers were pointedly avoiding looking in his direction. Lisa Parker. The older white woman standing near the customer service desk. Shifted uncomfortably. Her grip tightened on the strap of her purse. She wanted to say something. He could see it in the way she fidgeted. The way her mouth opened just slightly. Before she decided, "Not my place." Marcus dragged a slow hand down his face. Exhaling through his nose. "You have my account number right in front of you," he said, forcing his voice to stay even. "Why don't you look it up?" Victoria's expression didn't change. "That's not how we do things here." A laugh, low and humorless, pushed past Marcus's lips. "That's interesting," he said. "Because I've banked here for years. And not once have I been asked these questions. Not once have I been treated like I don't belong." He took a step closer to the counter. His voice sharpening. "So tell me, Victoria. What exactly about me makes you think I don't?" Silence. Thick. Stifling. Amy's gaze flickered toward Victoria. Uncertain now. Even she knew they had crossed the line. From policy. Into something else entirely. But Victoria. She didn't flinch. If anything. The slight curve of her lips suggested she enjoyed the power she thought she held in this moment. Her gaze drifted past Marcus. A flick of the eyes. That said more than words ever could. Ethan Reynolds stopped beside him. Close enough that Marcus could feel the presence of him. A shadow looming just at the edge of his periphery. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave," Ethan said. His voice, flat, impersonal. As if Marcus were nothing more than a minor inconvenience. As if he weren't a customer. At the very bank he built. Marcus turned his head slowly. Meeting the guard's eyes for the first time. He held his gaze. Searching. For any sign of awareness. Of doubt. Of hesitation. He found none. And yet he knew. Ethan didn't make this call. Victoria did. Amy did. All of them did. They had decided. The second he walked through those doors. That he didn't belong. That he wasn't deserving of the same courtesy. The same trust. The same ease. That had been extended to the man before him. The difference between them? Skin. Nothing else. And now. They were sending him out. Marcus inhaled once, deeply. Then exhaled. His patience thinning by the second. He had played this game long enough. He reached into his pocket. Slow and deliberate. And pulled out his phone. He unlocked the screen with a tap. Raised it slightly. And hit record. "You're refusing to process my withdrawal." he said. His voice, calm, but clear enough to carry. Despite having my identification, my account information, and despite processing an even larger withdrawal for a white customer right before me. Amy tensed. Victoria's jaw twitched. Ethan's stance stiffened. I'm going to ask you again, Ethan said. His voice a shade less certain now. Step outside. Marcus's grip tightened around his phone. And if I don't? Ethan didn't hesitate. He reached out. A firm hand wrapped around Marcus's forearm. Fingers curling with just enough pressure to make it clear. He wasn't being asked anymore. Marcus barely had time to brace himself before he was yanked backward. His shoulder collided with Ethan's solid frame as the guard spun him toward the door, shoving him forward with just enough force to make him stumble. A sharp gasp broke through the silence. Someone muttered, "What the hell?" But no one stepped in. His feet barely caught traction before he was shoved again. This time harder. Until his back hit the glass door. The impact sent a sharp shock up his spine. But Marcus didn't let it show. He refused to let them see it. The door swung open under the force. And the next thing he knew, he was outside. The cold morning air hit him like a slap. Behind him, Ethan stood in the doorway, arms crossed, looking down at him with impassive disinterest. And then, the final insult. His ID. The very thing they refused to acknowledge. The very thing that proved exactly who he was tossed to the ground at his feet. The small plastic card hit the pavement with a sharp, lifeless clatter. Something burned in Marcus's chest. Something hot and raw. Something dangerously close to the line between contained rage and outright fury. But before he could move, before he could reach down, a shadow passed over him. A second security guard. Jamal Brooks. Black. Mid-30s. Tired in a way that had nothing to do with physical exhaustion. Stepped forward. His expression was unreadable. But there was something in his eyes. When he crouched down. When his fingers closed around the discarded ID. When he dusted it off with deliberate, almost reverent care. Before handing it back to Marcus. "This place," Jamal muttered under his breath. Just loud enough for Marcus to hear. "Always does this." Marcus took the ID. His fingers brushing against Jamal's. Just briefly. Before the man pulled back. Jamal exhaled. Shaking his head. "Doesn't matter if you got a degree. If you got the credentials. If you keep your head down. And do everything right." He murmured. His voice carrying the weight of too many years of quiet endurance. "They don't want us here. Not in the offices. Not at the top. We're security. We're janitors. We're the numbers they need to make it look like they give a damn." He glanced back at Ethan. His expression filled with something between resignation and restrained disgust. "But this." His voice dipped lower. "Just for Marcus. This ain't new." Marcus stared at him for a long moment. Heart still pounding. Adrenaline still thick in his veins. Then slowly. He reached back into his pocket. He pulled out his phone again. But this time. He wasn't recording. He was dialing. The line rang once. Twice. Then. A crisp voice answered. "David Carter." Marcus's grip tightened. "I need you at the Chicago branch. Now." There was a beat of silence. On the other end of the line. Then a sharp inhale. I'll be there in 15. Marcus ended the call, sliding his phone back into his pocket. His fingers curled around his ID, the edges pressing into his palm, grounding him, keeping the fury simmering beneath his skin from boiling over. His eyes flicked to Jamal, who was still standing beside him, hands on his hips, gaze flickering between Marcus and the glass doors, where Ethan remained stationed, like a watchdog. Jamal let out a short, humorless laugh. "Well," he muttered, shaking his head. "This is about to get real interesting." Marcus didn't respond. He didn't need to. The next 15 minutes stretched like hours. Inside, through the glass, he could see the bank carrying on, as if nothing had happened. Victoria was back behind the counter, speaking to Amy. Her movements, sharp, efficient, dismissive. Ethan remained by the door, arms crossed, eyes occasionally flicking toward Marcus, but never holding his gaze for long. Lisa Parker had disappeared, probably deciding it was easier to remove herself than to witness something uncomfortable. Typical. Then, finally, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. The driver barely had time to put it in park before the door swung open, and David Carter stepped out. David was a man who commanded attention without asking for it. White, early 50s, salt and pepper hair, sharp suit, sharp eyes. Unlike the performative professionalism Marcus had faced inside, David's authority was real, earned, not projected. He didn't waste a second. The moment his gaze landed on Marcus, his expression tightened. Then he was moving. Ethan straightened as David approached, uncertainty flickering across his face. He must have recognized him. Must have realized. This wasn't just another customer. But David didn't even acknowledge the guard. He stepped right past him. The air in the bank shifted, as the glass doors parted for him, his presence slicing through the tension like a blade. Marcus followed. His steps, measured, controlled, though the heat of anticipation coiled in his chest. Jamal hesitated for only a second before trailing behind. The second Victoria turned and saw David. Her expression flickered, something between confusion and realization. She straightened, smoothing down the front of her blazer, quickly composing herself. Amy, standing just behind her, went stiff. "Mr. Carter," Victoria greeted, her voice forcibly even, her professional mask slipping into place. "I wasn't expecting." David didn't give her the chance to finish. Clearly, his tone was cold, cutting. "Because if you had been, this wouldn't be happening." Victoria's lips parted, then closed. A shadow of discomfort passed over her face, but she recovered quickly. "Sir, there seems to be some misunderstanding." "Oh, there's no misunderstanding." David cut in smoothly, his gaze shifting briefly to Marcus, before locking back onto her. "The only thing I'm confused about is why my CEO was just forcibly removed from his own bank." A dead silence fell over the room. Amy visibly paled. Ethan stiffened by the door. Even the tellers who had been pretending not to listen froze mid-transaction. Victoria blinked, then blinked again. For the first time, her perfectly composed expression faltered. Her mouth opened. A second too late. "I save it," David said, voice like steel. His gaze flicked to Amy. "You refused his transaction." Amy's throat bobbed. "I I was just following protocol. Protocol? David echoed. His tone edged with disbelief. He let the word settle. Let it stretch into the silence. Is that what we're calling blatant racial profiling now? Amy's mouth opened and closed. But no words came out. David didn't wait for an answer. His attention snapped back to Victoria. Tell me, Victoria, he said. Slow. Deliberate. Measured. Did you even check his account? Before you decided he wasn't qualified to access his own money? Victoria inhaled sharply. Her composure finally cracking. Sir, yes or no? David's voice was quiet. Lethal. Victoria hesitated. Just for a fraction of a second. But it was enough. David exhaled through his nose. A slow, calculated breath. Then he looked around the room. At Amy. At Ethan. At the tellers who had watched. And said nothing. He let the silence stretch. Let it smother them. Under the weight of what had just been exposed. Then finally. You're done here, he said. Victoria went rigid. Sir. Effective immediately, David continued. As if she hadn't spoken. And if I find out. This kind of treatment has been happening to other customers. His gaze flicked to Ethan. Or if any employee under my leadership thinks they can use their position to enforce their own biases. He let the sentence hang. Unfinished. The threat embedded in the silence. You won't just lose your job. You'll answer for it. Legally. Ethan had the decency to look away. Victoria's face flushed deep red. A stark contrast to the icy confidence she had held just minutes ago. This is completely unnecessary. Unnecessary. Marcus finally spoke. His voice, sharp. Incredulous. You had me thrown out like a criminal. You refused to even look at my ID. Refused to check your own system. You knew exactly what you were doing. Victoria flinched. David turned back to Marcus then. His expression shifting. Apology flickering in his eyes. Though he knew words wouldn't fix what had already happened. He nodded. Firm. Then turned to Jamal. And you? Jamal stiffened. Sir. David studied him for a moment. Then nodded slightly. You're promoted. Effective today. Jamal's eyes widened. Caught off guard. His stance shifting. You deserve better than working under people like this. David said simply. Then turned back to Marcus. Marcus. He said. The familiarity in his voice. Standing in stark contrast to the cold authority he had used with Victoria. You want this branch cleaned out? Marcus didn't hesitate. Completely. David nodded once. Then. As if the decision had already been made. He turned back to the stunned employees. Everyone involved in this incident is to be reported for bias training. Mandatory. His gaze lingered on Ethan. That includes security. The weight of his words settled over the room. Like a final nail in the coffin. Victoria opened her mouth again. But no words came out. Marcus exhaled. Slow. Steady. Then, without another glance at her, he stepped forward. Reclaiming his place at the counter. Amy stepped aside immediately. David gestured toward the computer. Process his withdrawal. This time. No one dared argue. The crisp stacks of bills were counted out. Placed neatly in front of Marcus. His money. His. Not something to be debated. Not something to be justified. Just his. As he took the cash, his gaze flicked to Jamal. The man was still standing there, looking slightly dazed, as if trying to process everything that had just unfolded. Marcus slid one of the stacks toward him. Jamal frowned. "Sir." Marcus held his gaze. "Take the day off." Jamal hesitated, then slowly reached for the cash, fingers curling around the bills. Marcus turned, finally meeting Victoria's gaze one last time. "You should have checked my ID," he said. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out. This time, no one stopped him. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.